hence the screech that filled the air. "Trouble?" Uraraka asked. Her heart monitor spiked, beeping more rapidly after hearing the noise. Years of being trained to go at the watch's tone had caused her to be put on alert whenever it chimed. "Just a robbery. 2 hostages. I'm the closest." He stood from his chair, eyes scanning the watch's little screen. "Stay safe," Uraraka said. He twisted the doorknob, sparing a glance over his shoulder as he did. "I will. You get better and come back to help us if you can." And with that, he was gone. After flinging the door shut behind him, he took off running as suggested by the sounds of shoes scuffing on the floor and muttered apologies. Uraraka sat still for a moment, eyes not leaving the door. He just ran out, though. Sighing, she turned her attention to the phone. She flipped it over in her hands a few times, feeling the cold casing fresh out of the box. Taking the charger out of her phone pocket it rested in, she plugged it into the outlet beside her bed. Uraraka set the phone down on the table, ignoring the way the screen flashed on. Her gaze settled on the window, not content with the air about the room once Midoriya had left. It wasn't his fault. He hadn't done anything malicious. Quite the opposite, really. Giving her a phone, helping her find a job, encouraging her. He was being kind, yet she couldn't help but find pity in his actions. Teeth gritted, she flung her head back onto the pillow. What were her goals, hopes, and dreams, aspirations? Was it still money, or closer to what Midoriya had said? Deciding against reevaluating her entire life's purpose while sitting in a hospital bed, Uraraka pushed the thoughts away, settling on adding back context to her new, overpriced phone. It had been a month, a long month of changing casts and debating jobs. Midoriya had given her a list after list, suggestion after suggestion, yet she had refused them all. Either it didn't feel right or the time didn't fit her schedule. Something always stood in the way. That's what Uraraka told herself anyway. Every time an opportunity was available, she'd find a way to get around it. "This doesn't work because," she'd say. "I don't think I can," Uraraka would add. "Well, my schedule is," anxiously she'd continue. "What's the real issue?" Midoriya asked her one day. His patience was frayed from an all-night interrogation, yet he insisted he'd still show up. "Nothing ever seems to work for you." He wasn't mad, far from it. He was concerned. Uraraka furrowed her brow. "I don't know." He cut to the chase. "Why do you want to be a hero? Did you figure that out?" His hand reached up, rubbing his tired eyes. The bags under them were dark purple in color, making him look a bit sickly. He reminded Uraraka of her father in that instant, concerned, sick, and trying his damnedest to be there for her despite it all. She couldn't help the lie that tumbled from her lips. "Yeah, I did," Uraraka nodded slowly. "What you said a while ago resonated with me. I want to help villains. I want them to be happier, live better lives, and get good jobs," she said, giving an ingratiating smile. Midoriya looked delighted with her answer, sitting up a little straighter. "That's wonderful to hear. Maybe you haven't found a good job because I've been going about this all wrong. I think I have the perfect thing and—" He cut himself off with a yawn, his eyes closing for a bit longer than normal. "Could I send it to you later? I should go home before I fall asleep here." "Of course," Uraraka chuckled, smiling genuinely this time as she watched him stand up. "I'll make sure to send it to you later." He stretched his scarred arm, reaching high and worn joints popping as he did. "Text me if I forget." "I will. You go sleep. You need it," Uraraka said, waving him off. "Bye," he called through the closing door. Uraraka replied in like, hoping he caught the words as he walked away. Uraraka, dropping the little act she put on, slumped back into her bed. She let her head rest against the wall and reached for the 50-pound dumbbell she'd been given. Touching it and activating her quirk, the weight went up without an issue. Watching it spin idly in the air, she smiled at the memory. Bakugo had gifted it to her, though calling it a gift was a stretch. The man had stormed in, yelling as always, after scolding her for being reckless, despite his own foolhardy and impetuous actions. He lowered his voice a bit. It wasn't quite as noticeable, but having known the hot-headed blonde for 12 years, Uraraka caught on. "Cheeks," he had said. "You did good with the kid and all. Any of us would have done the same, whether we made it out or not. That company is fucked up, not you." As if the situation were far too sweet for him, he ducked out the door, grabbing something. Uraraka didn't have time to respond, let alone register what he grabbed before it was being thrown at her. Using her quirk to stop it, she noticed the weight. "What the hell, Katsuki?" she hissed, glaring at the laughing man. You're gonna get lazy here for so long. Then your quirk won't work and you'll undo all that progress you made with our sparring, and I'm not letting that happen. He had crossed his arms, returning her glare with equal force. Fine, whatever, thanks. Urarka grumbled. She released the weight, catching it in her hand. She struggled to keep it up for a second, reactivating her quirk at a reflex. See? You can't even hold it up. You're wimpy again, Bakugo shouted, jabbing an aggressive finger towards her. I wasn't expecting it to be that heavy. I can lift 50, she said, rolling her eyes before adjusting her grip and releasing the weight from its state of nullified gravity. She lifted it properly, making a face at Bakugo while she did. A small part of her mind was panicked to find it was heavier than normal, but she was relieved she had retained the better part of her muscle. Whatever, wimp. I'm leaving, he huffed, turning on his heel and heading out the door. Bye, loser, Uraraka had called after him. See you, dumbass. Uraraka sighed, coming back to the present moment. She felt strained at this point, despite doing nothing. She felt like she was being pulled in so many directions. The heroes wanted her back in the field, her friends wanted her back at home, Midoriya wanted her to apply for all these different jobs. She was overwhelmed and frustrated with the green-haired man specifically. She knew it wasn't right, that he was trying to help, but what she once saw as pity grew to something like manipulation. He wouldn't do it on purpose, because Midoriya was a sweet man who put everyone before himself. But the saturated looks he gave when Uraraka offered him the correct answer to a job-related question could definitely be seen as guilt-tripping. Setting the dumbbell on her table, once he'd been lifting religiously after losing an arm wrestle to Bakugo last week, Uraraka grabbed her phone, the one she'd been given out of what could only be considered pity and concern. Scrolling through Twitter to read up on the latest hero controversies, Uraraka wasted an hour of her evening. A light ping is what lifted her from the swamp-like waters of social media and threw her back into the real world. Oh! She clicked the notification at the top of her screen. He sent it. The address read Izuku1A, his old high school email rather than his business one. Uraraka often wondered why he never changed it after he graduated. Then again, she never thought about it unless they were emailing each other. Apparently, the number one hero wasn't a fan of texting links. The subject line was brief, the only 2 words being, job suggestion. The contents weren't much better, mentioning only well wishes and general information that could apply to any hero job, really. A website link and a phone number were beneath the main body. Uraraka's only hope to make sense of her dear friend's awfully vague information briefing. Was he trying to dance around something? It opened up a page not unfamiliar to Uraraka, displaying several well-known public figures in front of a rather grim-looking building. The word Erebus was found on the stone sign above what was likely the front door of the prison complex. Isn't this that villain reform place? Uraraka skimmed the article posted beneath the picture. It detailed the origins of the high-walled building, tracing the idea's conception to many years ago. A group of psychologists had brought the blueprints forth to Hero Society, showcasing what could be if they accepted their offer and provided funding. The heroes, looking for ideas and not minding the price tag, gladly paid for the construction and staffing. Once the building had its first patients, it began showing its worth quickly, reforming villain after villain, correcting their mental states, and deeming some able to live back in the world was simultaneously their proudest and most controversial achievement. There were heroes like Deku who loved the prospect of helping someone, even if that person was a villain and needed additional help. Others, however, deemed it not only a danger to civilians, but irresponsible to let the villains run rampant back in the streets once they were declared fixed by the system. Uraraka wasn't sure where she sided in the battle. She wanted to help people, but if she put more at risk to do so, was it fair? Was it actually helping? This job sounded like one that Midoriya would take, not her. He would have jumped on this opportunity as soon as the words left their teacher's mouth had it been a choice back during their UA days. Uraraka figured the only reason he wasn't applying to the job himself was due to his already overcrowded schedule. Something Uraraka had heard about endlessly over the phone while he rearranged it and lost sleep to visit her in the hospital. She didn't want him to be responsible for her any longer than necessary, nor did she want him to think she was unable to make up her mind on decisions such as these. So a lengthy scroll through the application and one look at the paycheck later, Uraraka was filing her name out on the top of the page. "All right," Midoriya said proudly from where he stood beside Uraraka. He played the part of an encouraging father remarkably well, almost enough to start her reminiscing about her own dad. "Are you starting once you get out of here?" "Yeah," Uraraka smiled back. I let them know I was in the hospital, and they said they'd hold a place for me, just as a backup guard since nothing is open right now. I'm still going to be here for months, though. I haven't even started physical therapy the nurses keep reminding me of. She sighed at the last part. It was just another wall she'd have to get over, probably the biggest and last bump in the road. Looking at it through that lens made it much more tolerable. Well, I'll go with you the first time. If you want me to, of course. Midoriya offered, the smile on his face calm and lazily placed. He was always wearing that gleeful expression, so much so that Uraraka often wondered if he was faking it, or if he ever got tired of smiling like that. Thanks, that would be nice, she replied, but I haven't scheduled it yet. I've still got months before the cast even comes off. I'll let you know when. The ringing caused her to jolt, and she quickly placed the noise as Midoriya's watch. It emitted an eerie red glow that Uraraka remembered all too well, signifying something important he needed to attend to. Go on, it's important. Sorry, Uraraka waved. He was already mostly out the door. I'm so sorry, we can talk later. Curls of green hair bounced at the door, lagging slightly behind their owner as he broke into a sprint. The watch seemed to always cause overreactions. Uraraka could almost guarantee that it was nothing more than an escaped convict or spotted criminal that they needed the number one hero to apprehend. She had only pushed him out with such vigor in that manner because, although she would never tell him to his face, the man's constantly positive attitude and smiling face, coupled with his innocent suggestions and offers, were tiring. Being around him was easily the most tiring thing in her daily routine. Not that there was much competition for that slot. And that wasn't to say she didn't appreciate his company. He was her most regular visitor, always making sure to pop in at least once a week, though it would be once a day if he could fit it into his schedule. But his demeanor and outlook on life were two things Uraraka didn't share with him, two things that made up the core of his moral compass. Something that kept being brought up when the prospect of work, specifically hero work, was the center of their conversations. All in all, she was relieved to have the rest of the day to herself. Hoping the reason Midoriya was called wasn't a horrendous crime against humanity, she turned to her phone and began researching physical therapy. Thank you for listening to Once Upon a Tea Time. This was Chapter 4 of But Friend, This Cage is Inside Out by It's_Kingston on AO3, and I will leave a link to the original fic in the description below.